And good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Ritter with Channel 7 Eyewitness News, WABC TV. This is the countdown, election night coverage of what is likely to be very well the largest number of midterm election voters ever in the U.S. Perhaps one expert estimates up to 105 million people, the highest ever. Going to be quite a night. And we are streaming this live on ABC7NY and all our social media platforms, including my Facebook page. Donald Trump, excuse me, not on any ballot, but he might as well be. Exit polls show that Mr. Trump and the balance of power and the issue of health care top of mind for more Americans than anything else. We have a boatload of coverage over the next 3 hours, and we're going to be here every step of the way on television. You can watch ABC's coverage, and twice an hour we're going to be cutting in at Channel 7 for local race updates until Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock. But this streaming countdown show will continue right till 11. With me in studio tonight, political analyst and consultant Hank Scheinkoff, he's the one on the left, and Christine Quinn, former New York City Council Speaker and Deputy Chairwoman or Vice Chair of the New York State Democratic Party, and we have plenty of reporters out in the field. Before we get to them, I want to talk about what your expectations are of tonight and what you think about the problems involving New York ballots and the scanners. Hank, we'll talk to you.
I think the Republicans lose about 35 seats tonight, or the Democrat pickup is about 35 in the House of Representatives. I would bet that the Republicans maintain control of the United States Senate. Okay, locally, it should be a wipeout for the Democrats mostly. I think Lee Zeldin will be fine in Long Island. I think Peter King will be fine. I think Tenney. You're
saying 35 seats you believe for the
I believe
for the
35
Democrats.
seats.
Christine?
The Democrats, we take back the House. If it's a glorious night, we take back the Senate, but I don't think that's going to happen. We do take back the New York State Senate and have Democratic control there, which will move many, many important pieces of legislation forward. And I believe the governor and Tom DiNapoli for comptroller and Tish James for attorney general will have total blowouts.
And Christine and Governor Cuomo?
Absolutely, a total blowout.
And Senator Gillibrand.
As well, yes, I'm sorry, I forgot her.
Senator Gillibrand. And Menendez, your prediction on
Menendez will win.
He wins.
I'm going to go to our problems. We're going to begin with our breaking news, basically, is the problems with these ballots. We're going to hear in a few moments from Corey Johnson, the speaker, who followed you, and says, hey, I want this guy, the head of the Board of Elections, to resign because of this. We're going to hear from the Board of Elections CEO. Wet ballots, they couldn't go through the scanner. Did you have problems with yours?
I did have trouble getting my ballot through the scanner. It took 2 times. I said to the poll worker, the ballot seems wider than the mouth of the scanner, and he said that's correct. It's causing problems for us today.
And how big a problem is this thing, do you think?
It's a significant problem. Look, the political class will do what it always does. You know, it's kind of like the great line in Casablanca, there's gambling going on here, and then they'll disappear. Well, maybe this time they won't be allowed to, and maybe someone will launch a lawsuit against the provider, and maybe the provider of services wasn't wrong. Maybe that provider wasn't told exactly what was required.
Maybe not. Hang around. We're going to get back to you in a few minutes. We want to get out in the field where our reporters are. It is 8:06 right now in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Their polls have already closed. We have till 9 o'clock in New York to continue voting. If you're out there, if you're in line, by the way, the rules are, if you're in line when the polls close, you are in line. They cannot kick you out, so don't go anywhere. You can vote. We want to go to our NJ Burkett. He is in Fort Greene with all the polling problems. NJ, you know, we got problems with the infrastructure, whether it's subways or scanners, apparently.
Well, it was the scanners, Bill, no question about it. This is a community center in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. You can see it's a basketball court, basically, that's been turned into a polling place. People register over here, they get their ballots, and then they make their way across the gymnasium, where they line up over here to cast their ballots. Now, at one point today, Bill, all of the machines went down. I can tell you right now, the machines came back up, but this machine is now down. So, yes, the fact is there have been problems with the voting, problems with the scanners throughout the city. You know, it's a city of 8 million people. Breakdowns are not unheard of on Election Day, but the scale and the scope of this problem is something that is unusual. And so, yes, there were problems. The ballots, in some cases, got wet from voters with wet hands, who had wet hands, they had wet clothing, wet coats, wet umbrellas, and they got the ballots wet. And then they got jammed in the machines, and that was a problem. But by far the biggest problem was for the 2-page ballot. What they had to do is tear the ballot in half and then pass each page through the scanner one at a time. And whether it was the issue with the edges of the ballots, or whether it was issue with the scanner not being able to receive it properly, or simply people not tearing it properly, it seemed to add a level of complexity that they were not prepared for here in the city. And so, yes, as you said, Corey Johnson, the Speaker of the City Council, is now saying that the head of the Elections Commission needs to resign. He has now, the commissioner himself has said, no, not so fast. We're going to examine the problems. We're going to have a post-mortem on all of this and figure it all out and see what needs to be done. But the fact is, there were problems, and they want to get to the bottom of those problems, and they really should, Bill.
Okay. N.J. Burkett with a good wrap-up of all the problems that happened today. The polling place is not very crowded right now in Brooklyn, but boy, they were crowded before. And I want to show you, if you don't live in New York and you live somewhere else, these are 17-inch pieces of paper, a little more actually, and there were 2 pages, actually 3, with the propositions on the other side. And then you had to fill these out, put them through the scanner, and it was different, that's for sure. NJ mentioned the Speaker of the New York City Council, Corey Johnson. Corey is on the phone, I believe, to talk about his calls for some sort of changes. Corey, are you there, Mr. Speaker?
Hey, Bill.
Hi, good to hear you. Tell me what you're calling for and why. And by the way, joining us is Christine Quinn and Hank Scheinkoff.
Oh, hey, Chris. Hey, Hank. NJ talked about it, and I heard Chris talk about it earlier when she was trying to get her ballot into the scanner. But today there were widespread problems all across the city in all 5 boroughs. If you go on Twitter right now, you'll see New Yorkers and poll workers tweeting from every part of the city that they have massive lines of 50, 100, 150, 200 people because in certain polling sites right now, all of the scanners are down. Certain sites, not a single scanner is working. This has been going on since early this morning, widespread problems, and I really believe that the Board of Elections, they only have to perform really well a couple of times a year. This is one of those days. Today has been a disaster for the New York City Board of Elections, and we have to have a full and thorough investigation to figure out, did they do the pre-election testing on the machines? Were the ballots ordered properly to fit the machines? And did they have enough technicians to deploy across the city for machines that go down? Sometimes there are a few machines that go down. Today, it was totally widespread, and it's unacceptable. Many New Yorkers today have lost a tremendous amount of confidence in the New York City Board of Elections and their ability to conduct our elections in an efficient and meaningful way.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there is something you can do right now. There is 48 minutes left before the polls close. Could you extend the closing time? They have done it in 5 states, including Georgia, where there were problems and there were long lines. They've extended it. Could you extend New York City closing times on the polls until these machines and everyone who hasn't been able to vote can come and vote?
Well, I, of course, would be open to that. They did that, as you said, Bill, in other states. That was done by court order in these other states where folks came forward and got a legal injunction to keep the polls open because there was a delay in opening or there were problems at the polls. We saw that in New York today, so I would be fine with that because we need everyone who wants to cast a ballot to be able to do so. There were hundreds, if not thousands, if not more than that, New Yorkers who went to the polls this morning and who had to leave the polls without casting a ballot because of the chaos and dysfunction that they saw in their local polling site. So we want to make sure everyone has the opportunity. As you said before, if you're in line at 9 p.m., stay in line and you'll be able to cast your ballot.
Too late, Christine Quinn, to go to court?
Nothing's impossible, but it's 8:12, 8:15 for all intent and purposes. I think it is too late to go, but it's not too late to make sure this doesn't happen again. I mean, look, the excuses are that the ballots are wet and that you had multiple pages. Well, they knew there were multiple pages. Start preparing. And guess what? It rains in New York City.
And they get wet, and scanners don't work. Corey's laughing. Mr. Speaker, you're laughing. There's going to be a lot of analyzing what happened as we go forward. But right now, I think people are mostly worried about what happens to those voters who have not been able to vote yet because, as you said, several places have had all their scanners down. So no chance, you think, of getting to court this late, Mr. Speaker?
I think that's probably unlikely. One of the things that was most flabbergasting to me was Mike Ryan, the executive director, saying, I believe it was on ABC earlier today, that there was heavy turnout and there was rain and they did the best they could. That is not good enough. That is a really appalling excuse to use on a day like this, and it shows, I think, a major tin ear in understanding what's at stake and how angry New Yorkers are. They could have predicted this turnout. We saw it in the primaries, and we saw it across the country, and the rain has been in the forecast for almost a week now. So to use those two excuses for the dysfunction and chaos at the Board of Elections, which starts from the top, is completely and wholly unacceptable.
All right, Corey, I'm going to have to end it there. We're going to have to get to our New Jersey coverage, and I appreciate you taking the time on this very busy night. You've been outspoken. By the way, we do have Michael Ryan, the CEO of the Department of Elections, DOE, and he's going to be with us a little later in this hour. Mr. Johnson, Speaker Johnson, thank you for joining us tonight. Okay, thank you very much, Corey Johnson. I want to talk to Hank and Christine in a moment, but I want to continue our coverage in New Jersey. Get right over there with the Menendez and Hugen coverage. Our New Jersey reporter Anthony Johnson is at the Hugen headquarters. As you see, no percentages, no precincts reporting yet in New Jersey. Only 14 minutes and 25 seconds since the polls have closed. The opinion polls show Mr. Menendez lays one with a 15% lead. That is up from about 7% just a week ago. Anthony Johnson is at the Stagecoach Tavern in the Mountainside, in the city of Mountainside, town of Mountainside in New Jersey. Anthony, you're at Hugen headquarters. You spent a whole lot of money, outspent Menendez 3-1. Does he have a shot? What's the mood there?
Well, the mood here right now is pretty upbeat. The crowd really filling in here inside the tavern over the last hour. A full crowd here. They're starting to watch as the votes come in from around the country. Also, just anxiously anticipating to see what's going to happen in this Senate race here in New Jersey. Of course, a lot of these folks out here, supporters of Bob Hugen, excuse me, we just want to show you some video a little bit earlier today of the candidates when they went in to vote. Both Bob Menendez, of course, and Bob Hugen, both going in to vote this morning and encouraging their supporters to get out to the polls today. And that's what they've been focusing much of their attention on the last week as far as voter turnout, trying to get people out to the polls. You know, it rained here in the state of New Jersey, but just like we saw in New York City, a lot of people did get to the polls today. So now they're just interested in seeing what the results here inside the Hugen headquarters in Mountainside, New Jersey. It has been quite a campaign. A whole lot of money has been spent. It has been a very nasty campaign full of salacious accusations made by both candidates, actually. And of course, that's what set the tone for this race. Now, as far as Bob Hugen is concerned, he was a former businessman who was very, very successful in the Celgene Corporation. He led that corporation, and he did very well there. He decided to jump into politics in this race and has put on a very good campaign. As a matter of fact, the polls have been pretty much up and down over the last couple of weeks. A couple of weeks ago, there was actually a poll that said this race had about a 4-point spread. Poll that came out yesterday said that spread was 15 points in favor of Bob Menendez. But really, the only poll that counts tonight is the poll of the voters, and they certainly did their job here in New Jersey today. So they're anxiously anticipating. Everybody's waiting to see what the results of this are going to be tonight. But like I said, there's television monitors everywhere. They're looking at those monitors. They're paying attention not only to this race, but also paying attention to races all across the country.
So, Anthony, I'm going to ask you to stand by.
Inside the room. And like I said, we are certainly waiting to see what the results of this campaign will be.
Okay, Anthony Johnson, I appreciate that. We'll get back to you for some. I'd like to ask you some questions about that mood in the room a little later in this hour. Chris and Hank, I want to talk to you guys about what you think about Menendez. A lot of people in New Jersey are going to, I've talked to them, are going to hold their nose, vote for Menendez, Democrats, because they don't want Mr. Trump to have another Republican senator.
That's probably accurate. Look, New Jersey, a big blue state. Bob Menendez comes from a very, very populated portion of it. Guess what? They're not walking away from him. And if it's a choice between helping Donald Trump or electing a Democrat, they know, well, there's no choice.
Last time, Chris, that a Republican was elected senator in the state of New Jersey was 1972.
Yeah, and we're not going to see one elected tonight. I mean, I think everything Hank said is true, and also I think the Menendez campaign did a very good job of linking Hugan very closely to Donald Trump, with just the records.
Pictures and everything else, right?
And the facts that he said he would have voted for Kavanaugh, that he, supports Donald Trump's policies. I mean, they were taking the words from his own mouth and just putting them in an ad, and I think it did him in.
Look, it's really simple. If the issue is health care, and you're charging your opponent with raising the prices on cancer treatment drugs, what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
You get enough points behind them, you don't need a lot of gross rating points.
And healthcare was the biggest issue on the minds of Americans. 41% of Americans, far greater than anything else.
Bob Menendez is not an incompetent. An incompetent would have lost that race. It's simple, because he had the best argument.
And yet, Mr. Hugan was in this seat, Hank, where you are, a couple of weeks ago, and said, he didn't want any part of Mr. Trump to campaign for him.
Listen, you know what? There's an old expression in Brooklyn. He can take the pipe, too, He wants to walk away from the guy that he was close to in this thing. Not right.
It's not going to happen.
And people don't believe it. What, you turn your, all around and dump the guy who brought you to the party because he doesn't seem appealing at the end? People don't like disloyalty, and people don't like opportunists.
Okay. You, I know, are going to go to the campaign headquarters for the Democratic Party campaign headquarters, which your vice chair. Governor Cuomo is going to be there, Senator Gillibrand, other people. I think Letitia James is going to be there as well.
Tom DiNapoli.
Tom DiNapoli. The comptroller, he's running for comptroller, and of course, Letitia James running for attorney general. Either way, there will be a black attorney general.
Yes. In
the state of New York, which that's his history making. We'd love to get a camera to you later after the polls close, if you're willing to do that. Not being all that camera shy. I mean, I am beaten by Chuck Schumer, but I think I could make that happen. Okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming. You're very welcome. And Hank, you're going to stick around for a while. We'll get to you. Want me to? I would love you to. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our discussion, but I had an interview earlier today with ABC News political director Rick Klein about what to expect tonight, what you can look at as you're watching television and watching online, and what to look for as the night unfolds politically. Here's the interview. So there's an old saying among some of us old wags in television news. Numbers in news tend to confuse. And I think about that every time I write something. How many numbers do I put in this? One of the realities of covering elections is that there are so many darn numbers. It's just the way it is. So with all due apologies, because sometimes numbers in news tend to confuse, I'm going to dive deep into some of our numbers with ABC's political reporter, ABC News political director, but you're also a political reporter, Rick Klein, who's in person here. Usually we see you for up close on satellite from Washington, but now you're here because you are 24/7 for ABC. It's the Super Bowl. This is the big time. This is what it's all about. And quite a set you guys have. Yeah, it's really cool. It's a great place, and we're going to be there all night. This is where the action is. Numbers in news tend to confuse. You have to throw that out the window at election night. Sure. Yeah. Well, it's all about numbers, and we've been counting up to 23 House seats, 2 Senate seats for Democrats. Those are the key numbers. Inside of those, of course, a lot of close elections. Each one of those fought on its own battleground. Before we get in the weeds on that, 23, we're going with 23, ABC News is going with 23. The New York Times says 24. What's the difference? Well, one big difference is that there's at least one seat that the Democrats have basically given up already. It's in Pennsylvania because of redistricting. Now, they're going to win other parts of Pennsylvania, but there's one seat in western Pennsylvania that they aren't even fielding a serious candidate. So everyone is kind of giving that to the Republicans. The fact is they're probably going to have to win not just 24, maybe 25 or 26 to make up for some losses that may happen elsewhere. Minnesota is one state we're watching like that. So you're talking about a net of 23. They need to be plus 23 for the night. We do, and in keeping with the numbers theme, confusing theme, we know what the numbers are. We see the polls. We saw the polls in 2016. You talk to Nate Silver, and he'll say, well, we were closer than anybody. We said Trump had a 30% chance of winning. That's pretty good odds, sort of. That's maybe a spin or something. But regardless, he says that we were less bad than anyone else. How sure are you of what all these prognosticators are saying? The polls have actually kind of come in the same direction. And you go into Election Day, our poll had the Democrats winning by 8 points nationwide. Now, of course, that's not how you elect House members. It's not. We don't have a national election. That's right. Democrats need to kind of cover the point spread. And that point spread's around 6 to 8. So you're right on the cusp. And this is what I've been thinking about, Bill, is that if the polls are wrong by about 2 points in either direction, that's the difference between Republicans holding the House and gaining in the Senate versus Democrats taking everything, running the table, winning the House big, and even taking the Senate. So what you're saying, Rick, is that the margin of error here is very small. Right. That's right. And if we're off just a little bit,
because the electorate looks different, or there's some other factor or some other force that we're just not picking up in the polls, it could have huge consequences for the numbers.
Well, there are a tremendous number of forces at play here. The first is the big one, and that is huge numbers of people. You know, yesterday you pointed out that some professor who had studied this in Florida estimated that we're going to have 105 million Americans, by far the most that's ever voted in a midterm election.
Yeah, it is off the charts. We've seen it in early voting. We've seen it in early absentee voting. The numbers have been higher, and we're trending toward a high-interest election. Now, you might say off the bat, well, that's good for the Democrats. Not necessarily. We are seeing a lot of interest among Republicans as well in early voting. President Trump been traveling the country, getting his voters out, and said explicitly, a vote for candidate X is a vote for me. So both sides are energized. That's unusual in a midterm year. Usually, the out party has all of the energy. This year, really, both sides are in it.
So we can thank President Trump. Donald J. Trump of Queens, New York, is the factor, is the reason that so many people, for or against, are coming out to vote.
That's exactly right. And you could easily see the Trump factor giving Democrats the House because of the opposition to him, and maybe helping Republicans pick up a few seats in the Senate. The same reason could be responsible for a split outcome.
It's so interesting. The other thing is that, you know, one time, just 2 weeks ago, sounds like, you know, it might, in dog years, it's 14 weeks. The president pointed out that all the bomb stuff was distracting from the early voting numbers because that was helping the Republicans. He had no way of knowing that because they don't count the votes yet.
Yeah, I think they got some anecdotal data throughout. The Republicans felt like they were closing pretty strong after the Kavanaugh hearings, but of course other news intervened, and we had a week that was consumed by those bomb threats against major Democratic figures and media institutions, and then of course the Pittsburgh shooting two weekends ago, and that seemed to kind of soften whatever bump that Republicans might have felt.
The parlor game that is politics from your end, from our end, from reporting end, and the way you political polls, you know, you're not a poll, but you are a political junkie. How you think about this and talk about it. President Trump believes, I think down to in his fiber, that talking about immigration, the red meat issues to his base, is the key to the success for Republicans. And yet we hear so much about his aides and his staff saying, talk about the economy, it's booming, talk about that. He thinks that's boring. Yeah,
he may be right, and the other side may be right as well. And that's why this is such an interesting election. You really have two different countries voting at the same time. And for the Trump base, for Red America, the immigration issue is a hot one. And if the president goes out there, he sees the crowds, he sees the feedback. If you were to travel in the Trump bubble around the country, you'd think this is a president with a 70 or 80% approval rating. Of course, those are the supporters. They are into their guy and more fired up than ever when they're talking immigration. But if you look at how the battle for the House of Representatives, 435 House districts across the country, is actually fought, it's a lot different. The makeup of these districts, maybe they're red-ish. They've had Republicans for a long time, but they're not as fired up by the anti-immigrant rhetoric as much of the rest of Trump country, and that's why Republicans are having a hard time holding on. So the president's 11 speeches in 8 days, which he's finished last night with 3. All that's designed more for the Senate than the Congress. Yeah, I mean, you look at that schedule, he wasn't really maybe with one exception, that there's even a competitive House race that happened to be nearby. This was about the Senate. And I think it seemed to fit into the broader sense that the Republicans are likely to lose the House. Not that they're writing it off, but that it seemed likely that was going to go away. And if you're going to use the president's time, where can you most help? You're helping senators in red states. Some of these states that he's been campaigning in, Montana, West Virginia, Missouri, Indiana, he won huge. He won by 15, 20, 30 points. So this is where Trumpism has always been very strong. And there is no question, as Mr. Rush Limbaugh pointed out last night at one of the rallies, there's no candidate in the United States of America who can draw those kind of crowds. Maybe Barack Obama in 2008. And 2007. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think we've seen this election start to generate the potential for a next generation of stars. And I think you look at Beto O'Rourke, who's gotten the biggest crowds on the Democratic side. Candidate running against Ted Cruz in Texas. That's right. And I think you look at the gubernatorial candidates, Andrew Gillum in Florida, Stacey Abrams in Georgia. They're both young African-American candidates, part of this rising generation. You see the potential there for something big. And there were some big Bernie Sanders rallies, but clearly President Trump remains the biggest star in politics today. Even if they all win, let's say Beto O'Rourke kicks out Ted Cruz, but he's behind in the polls, but you don't know what's going to happen because some of those people who support him are the people like the Trump supporters who don't talk to pollsters. That's right. And Stacey Abrams wins in Georgia, and Mr. Gillum wins in Florida as governor.
these guys are and women are just going to be in office for 2 years. It's going to be the same kind of inexperience that led to Barack Obama running when he was senator after only 2 years.
Yeah, that is true, although if you look back at the last half a century, some of the most successful Democrats have been people that are new to the national scene, even if they had more elected office experience. Go back to JFK, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. The Democrats have had a good track record with someone who's new and fresh and young, 40s or 50s, as opposed to going with someone who's been around for a long time. That would be the argument for a fresh face versus a Joe Biden or a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, and Ronald Reagan on the Republican side, and Donald Trump. You know,
we like things new. We like things fresh.
George H.W. Bush did not win re-election. He won because he was, I think, on the Reagan heels. And the governor of Massachusetts did not do, Michael Dukakis did not do that great.
That's right.
That great a campaign in '88. I don't want to go back too far, but you're right. It's a good point. And the inexperience factor has only gotten more sort of dramatic with absolutely no experience, not just no national political experience, no political experience. And we're seeing it in some of the races in our areas as well. And I don't want to get I don't want to categorize things because our polls are still open, but when this airs. But I do want to talk about some of the newbies that are running. We have Max Rose, we got Mikey Sherrill, all these people who are running for Congress and have never run for, I don't think they ran for student body president.
Yeah, there is, it's a big trend. The Mikey Sherrill case, I think, is a really interesting one because she's a female veteran, helicopter pilot.
And those shots in the helicopter are pretty dramatic.
It's a terrific campaign ad. And Max Rose on Staten Island. And we're talking about people that are new and fresh to the system. And maybe voters are giving it more of a shot in a year like this, in the Trump era. Look, there's always been an outsider vibe that helps in politics. You're able to say, I'm not with those guys, Washington politicians, both parties stink. But the anti-incumbency sense that we've had, we have change election after change election. Go back to 2006, and almost every 2 years, it feels like the voters are saying, we want change, whether that's the Dems or the Republicans, in either direction. And it feels to me that that's the attitude that still prevails here in 2018.
Starting in 1994, when the Republicans took control of the Congress, the Newt Gingrich and the Compact with America and all that. I want to talk about, I meant to ask you about Pete King, who's been there since 1992, so that's 26 years, in the fight for his life. I mean, all the trends show he's probably going to take that seat, but this new candidate, Yubi Shirley, has never run for office before. Mom who went to the FEC saying, can I use my campaign funds to pay for child care because I'm a working mom?
And she won that, as a matter of fact.
And Pete King on
change.
This show did not oppose that. He said, I'm not going to oppose that. If she wants to do that.
That to me is a perfect indicator of what it means to have this new kind of voices represented. That issue hadn't come up before. It wasn't an issue. No male candidate had ever asked about it. But I think if we end up with a lot of these people populating Congress, whatever happens to Pete King and whatever happens to Max Rose and Mikey Sherrill, you do have just different voices at the table. Change has already happened. History has already been made with this class of candidates and this historic year.
Anything that's going to surprise you? Do you have a prediction? And yet I know you're going to say, well, but anything can happen because it's an election.
Well, the thing I'm looking at nationwide is the suburbs. You could start in Long Island and New Jersey and go outside Philadelphia or Washington.
And I want to tell you something else. New Jersey's a great state. And I want to make sure that we all know, Democrats and Republicans, that campaigns at the state level should be waged in every city, in every county. We've gone everywhere. We've gone into Newark, into Jersey City, obviously to Union City, where we're from, everywhere, whether it's down south, where the southern part of the state has often been disregarded and not paid attention to. We have fought to make sure they know that the Bob Hugin Senate campaign and the Bob Hugin role as a senator is going to be inclusive, and all New Jerseyans are going to be part of what we're going to do. So we're going to have the TVs on. You're going to see it roll out. I want to warn you that the turnout is huge, and the vote by mail very possibly will not even be finished counting. It's so big tonight. There is a possibility, and we'll see, right? We don't know. There are people who believe the anti-Trump people are going to dominate the throw, and we don't believe that. But the anti-Menendez people and the pro-Bob Hugin people are going to dominate the night, and that's what we're counting for. So, So listen, we're gonna be here for as long as it takes, and hopefully we're gonna know the result tonight. and we hope it's going to be the right one, because the people of Jersey deserve better. We're going to give them better. So, but I just want to say thank you. I just want to let you know that I am so humbled by the support you've given us. We love you. It is so amazing. We've got the support we've seen, and we're going to kick butt, and we're going to get it done, and then we're going to go and make the difference for all the people of Jersey. We got so much to do. This state is a great state, headed in the wrong direction, and we're going to turn it around. Bless that. So listen, thanks so much. Let's have a great party, and let's make sure we come back and we have the results and say we're onward and go forward. So thanks so much. Thank you very much.
That was Bob Hugin, who has just been defeated, according to ABC News, making a projection that Bob Menendez, who was outspent by Bob Hugin, he was outspent 3-1. 3-1. More than $30 million by Bob Hugin, a former pharmaceutical company executive, spending 3 times what the incumbent senator from New Jersey, Bob Menendez, spent. About $11 million is what he spent in his campaign. Bob Hugin, more than $30 million. Much of it his own money. As he, paid for ads, lots of ads on TV that were, many people said, vicious. Mr. Hugin, though, defended them, saying they were just the truth. But a lot of people say they went over the top. Mr. Hugin did not, and neither does his staff. Anyway, he lost. He's going to lose, according to the projections by ABC News. This is what we have right now, with just 1% of the vote in. 48% for Menendez, 47% for Hugin, as you can see, very tight. But we don't know where that is coming from, and there's 99% of the vote left. Based on what they've seen so far, the experts, the political experts at ABC News, projecting Bob Menendez winning another term as U.S. Senator despite his indictment and then a hung jury and a mistrial in the federal courts for corruption. Our political reporter, Dave Evans, is at Menendez headquarters. Our political consultant and analyst, Hank Scheikoff, is here, and we're going to talk to him in a second, but I want to talk to Dave on the ground and see what's happening at the Menendez headquarters in the light of all this. We saw you on air a few seconds ago, David, and you had some interesting things from the mayor of Newark and some of the people there on the ground, and they know what's happening now, and it doesn't sound like it's too boisterous there.
No, I think, and the reason for that is I think supporters of Bob Menendez here at his headquarters in Hoboken, this is not a surprise. They have seen the last few days of polling. We had a poll from Quinnipiac yesterday showing him ahead of Bob Hugin, 15 points. I talked to some supporters out in the hallway about 20 minutes ago. They said they feel very, very good about their numbers tonight. They think that they will even go above that 15-point margin from the Quinnipiac poll from yesterday. So I think the lack of excitement perhaps that we're seeing here at headquarters for Bob Menendez in New Jersey is the fact that it is still early in the evening, but also this is kind of what they expected.
David, can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, I hear you.
Hank Scheikoff is here, and I want to get both of you involved because you have been on this panel with both of you. I want to say something about the ABC News exit poll from New Jersey, and it's fascinating. Bob Menendez's victory is largely thanks to the 55% of New Jerseyans who want to see control of the Senate flipped from Republican to Democrat. That's the highest among the 18 states where they asked this on exit polls. So that says a lot, Hank.
Sure does. Look, the cemetery of American politics is filled with a lot of self-funding candidates like Mr. Hugin. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong year. Trump at the top of the card, even though he wasn't there. It's all about Trump, and guess what? End of discussion for Mr. Hugin.
Yeah, Dave Evans, party over the person, apparently, right? Because a lot of New Jersey people we talked to, they were going to sort of hold their nose and vote for Senator Menendez. So again, I think it sounds like party over person sort of paid off here.
Exactly, and if you look at that polling, that exit polling that you talked about from tonight, showing the favorability, unfavorability of Bob Menendez, 33 favorable, 63% unfavorable, but we expect him, as the projection is tonight, that Bob Menendez is going to win. You've got to look at the registration here in New Jersey. We call this a deep blue state for a reason. There are 2 million registered Democrats in the state of New Jersey. Compare that to the Republicans, that's 1.2 million Republicans in New Jersey. So this is a deep blue state. The sentiment against Donald Trump very, very deep in this state, especially because of the tax bill and the impact that that is going to have on New Jersey property owners, especially next year when the 2019 taxes come due. So very, very unpopular Donald Trump in this state. So I'm not surprised at all that this election was called this early tonight for Bob Menendez.
And apropos of what you just said, David, Hank, listen to this. Among the 60% who disapproved of Mr. Trump's job performance, among that 60% who didn't like Mr. Trump's job performance, Menendez beat Hugan by 83-14. So it was all about against Donald Trump.
That's what I said a moment ago. It is all about Donald Trump, especially in a blue state. And by the way, Menendez, again, he comes from Hudson County. Where are the votes in New Jersey?
Northern New Jersey.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that Hudson County vote, if he got it all, well, he did real good.
All right, David, it was only 7 points just 2 weeks ago. What do you think turned it around? You know, I know what your reaction was and a lot of experts' reaction when you saw those Hugan ads. Could they have backfired?
Well, I don't think the ads backfired. First of all, I think that, you know, a year ago, no one even knew who Bob Hugan was. So he has proved that negative advertising certainly works. And he got within 5 points of Bob Menendez. But I think in a campaign like this, what he had to do, perhaps 2-3 weeks ago, he needed to move from that constant negative message to something positive, something uplifting, something that he was going to do for New Jersey instead of constantly talking about the corruption allegations against Bob Menendez. He never did that. All New Jersey voters saw for months and months and months was this $40 million spent on negative campaign ads.
All right, David, I appreciate that. Stand by, David. We're going to get to you again once the polls close in New York and get your get what happens at the Menendez headquarters. Hang up for 1 second because I do want to get to Michael Ryan. Last half hour you heard us talking to Corey Johnson, the Speaker of the New York City Council, who was very angry about what happened today during the election. There is still 20 minutes left. The New York polls open, and Mike Ryan, who I know has had one kind of bad day, but an exciting day because so many people voted, 20 minutes left. Mr. Ryan, can you hear me? It's Bill Ritter.
Yes, I can.
Great. Thank you for joining us on the countdown at WABC TV and Eyewitness News. I know this is a tough day for you, but you heard what Corey Johnson said. He kind of wants your head, and he wants real change to happen with these voting machines. What happened? We heard you. We played a soundbite earlier about what happened. But what do you think happened, and what are you going to do going forward? And before you answer that, hold on, Michael. Can you keep these polls open where people did not vote, and the machines are still down? Can they stay longer than 9 o'clock? Should they come back if they weren't able to vote?
So the reality with the polls at the end of the night is whenever we have lines at a poll site, and this election is no different, if there are people online at 9 p.m., we establish the end of the line. We work with the NYPD closely, and either a poll worker or a police officer marks the end of the line at 9 p.m. And then anybody who's on the line at that point, should there be any, they will have a full and fair opportunity to cast their ballot, and the polls will stay open to service those voters.
What if they went home, they couldn't do it, they just couldn't wait that long? You know, people have lives, they have kids, and they have jobs. Is there any way to keep these polls open? We have 5 states, Michael, that have kept the polls open longer than the deadline that already passed because there were problems. Can you do that? Do you have the right to do that?
Like I said, anybody that's online at 9 o'clock will be serviced.
That's different than saying we're going to extend the deadline till 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Can you do that?
Well, in that sense, Mr. Ritter, respectfully, there is no deadline. If they're online, we'll get to all of the voters that happen to be online.
Okay. So anyone who hears this, who has not voted and was left with a ballot that wasn't filled out, they can go to any polling place, their polling place, and stand in line.
Polling place, correct.
Right, stand in line, no matter what time. If the line is 3,000 people long and it takes till midnight, you will honor that vote.
We'll process them all if they're online at 9 p.m.
Okay.
And that at the end of the line will be established by the end of the line will be established by the NYPD and the poll workers.
What?
And they'll mark the end of the line, and anybody who's online can vote.
Michael, you said earlier, and you told us, and you were great about being interviewed earlier to try to explain to New Yorkers what was happening. You told us that the wetness of the ballots kind of jammed up the scanning machines. Was it tested for this? Was it tested enough?
No, that was certainly true at that one particular poll site that I was talking about, PS22. And at the time that I made those comments, we were in the middle of the heaviest rain downfall of the day, and people were coming in soaking wet. So that was a contributing factor at that poll site. But the two main factors that we have with the ballot issues were the number of voters that are turning out and the fact that we used a two-page ballot for the first time in the history of the city of New York. And I've been told by our vendor that using a ballot with perforated edges on both sides has never been done anywhere in the country. But that's what's required by New York state law. So we did the best we could under difficult circumstances. And I'd also like to point out that the voting machines are coming to the end of their useful life cycle. And there are new, more modern ways to vote, but they're going to come with a hefty price tag. We're probably talking in the 9-figure range.
So you're saying that you have antiquated infrastructure when it comes to having an election for the biggest city in the country.
These machines were put into place in 2010. We were told that they had a potential life expectancy of 10 years. The end of their life expectancy will be the end of 2019. So they're coming to the end of their useful life expectancy. And we used a two-page ballot, four-sided ballot, for the first time in the history of the city of New York in 4 of the largest boroughs. Staten Island didn't have these issues because they used the ballots the way that we've always used them, as a one-page, two-sided ballot. So if we had record turnout, and if you could just indulge me a second, if we had turnout, say, of 2 million, and I can't say that that's true, but if we did, then it's like 4 million people voted because we're using 2 pages.
Understood.
So I'm using that as a potential math example, but we'll know what the turnout is at the end of the night as we start to count the votes.
You heard the interviews today with Corey Johnson. You saw the Twitters. He wants you to resign. Are you going to resign?
There's ample opportunity to evaluate all things Board of Election after this election is over. We'll do our postmortem analysis, and we'll take stock in where we are as a Board of Elections. My focus tonight is the voters, and to make sure that we finish this process, we get all the voters voting, and we tabulate the results. And in a few weeks down the road, we certify this election, and when the dust settles on that, everybody will have an opportunity to weigh in on what different things we should do.
Well, we salute you for having the voters top of mind, and all those good, hardworking volunteers that you've had, hundreds and hundreds of them. We salute them as well. Michael Ryan, the CEO of the Board of Elections. We appreciate it's been a tough day, but you've got a lot of people voting in New York City today, and a long way to go, too. If they're in line, they get to vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ritter, and you always thank the poll workers for us, and I thank you for that.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Michael Ryan,
thank you.
CEO of the Board of Elections. Tell me quickly, Hank, what you make of that, and what do we need to do? He's a nice guy. He was caught in something, and maybe it should have...
He is a hard worker who's got an impossible task, and he ought to be allowed to finish his work. That's really true. He may not be the one to blame. It may be the provider of the voting machines. It may be the weather. It may be the fact they're just running out of steam. I'm talking about the machines. The larger question is, abolish the Board of Elections. It's time. Get a real department in there and make it happen.
We will debate that. Stick around. I want to have you weigh in on this next race, because on Staten Island, New York's 11th congressional district, incumbent Dan Donovan facing a pretty good challenge by Max Rose, the Democrat. Lucy Yang is there for us. She's at the Vanderbilt at South Beach on Staten Island. Lucy, a fairly tight race, tighter than Mr. Donovan thought this would be.
Tighter than incumbents like to have when they're running for re-election, Bill. We're at the headquarters for Max Rose, and as you can see, the room is starting to fill up. They booked a fairly large ballroom, anticipating a large turnout of his volunteers and supporters here. He's 31 years old, a Democrat, mounting a challenge for the 11th congressional seat. Last night he told me the issues are the commuting disaster for residents here and the opioid crisis. Those are two issues he'd like to tackle if elected to Congress. I also spoke to the incumbent, Dan Donovan, the Republican incumbent, who, by the way, turned 62 today. He is a lawyer, former prosecutor, and he talked about his experience dealing with issues that affect Staten Island and South Brooklyn. That is the district that District 11 encompasses all of Staten Island and a sliver of South Brooklyn. He talked about his experience. He talked about the strong economy that residents are enjoying right now and how those are very important issues for the people in this district. Interesting, the tone in this particular race for the 11th congressional district did not hang on Donald Trump. Max Rose did not criticize him throughout the campaign. Dan Donovan did not hang on to Donald Trump's tailcoat throughout this campaign. Both men talked about issues they thought would resonate with voters. In fact, Max Rose said he's about not supporting bad politicians, not a particular party of politicians. And Dan Donovan talked about issues that he thought his voters would appreciate that he had been working on. So a very different tactic here. We have to remember this district voted for Donald Trump. They voted for him with pride, unapologetically, with large signs on their lawn. So both candidates were careful about how they treated the president in their campaign, stumping through this area.
All right, Lucy, stick around. We're going to come back to you once the polls close and keep track of the Max Rose, Dan Donovan race. Hank, we have about a minute left before we have to take another break, and I'd like you to stick around again because your insight on all this stuff is interesting. But the Max Rose, he had effective ads. Dan Donovan's a closer race that he wants. What's going to happen in the end?
Max Rose is the perfect candidate for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He's a veteran.
Afghanistan.
He's a veteran. Afghanistan. He's got the photos. He's got the proof. That gives him some conservative credentials in a very conservative district. He'll win Brooklyn, but Staten Island will likely go to, guess who? Dan Donovan.
A lot of those voters on that western side of Brooklyn that are in this district typically don't vote in the congressional race because they know it's going to go Republican.
Correct. That's true. And I would suggest that look, past practice is the best indicator of future activity. Mr. Rose will be around a long time. We've not heard the last of him, but the race tonight likely will go to Dan Donovan.
And once again, another Republican in New York or New Jersey, in the tri-state, keeping arm's distance from Donald Trump.
And I'll tell you something. The Republicans lose the House. The guy that we need really a lot of is Dan Donovan. Why? Because he'll be the go-to person on the Republican side of the aisle for New Yorkers.
Oh, that's really
And so will Zeldin, if Zeldin survives as well.
Going to keep sticking around. Stick around. We have another couple hours to go, and I'd love to get your take on what's going on. And the numbers are coming in, as you see. Polls close in about 9 minutes and 39 seconds or 50 seconds in New York, and we're going to keep you covered all the way. Our live coverage continues now on ABC 7 NY all night. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to go back to the close of the polls in New York, and we'll bring you up to date with any kind of projections made by ABC News or the AP. We'll be right back.
Go into those tiny counties. They're really small, but he's hitting at 63%. He's north at 60 in almost all of these, 75% in some. The Trump voters, the Republican voters, turned out in those areas in big numbers.
They did. And Nate Silver, a pickup here for the Republicans. You had high odds for the Democrats to take over the Senate going into the night, getting a lot higher.
For Republicans to keep the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, for Democrats to take it, right. The odds are against them.
Yeah, no, I mean, they have to draw it to an inside straight now. Indiana was one of the places that could be a problem for them, but not as difficult as North Dakota, for example, or West Virginia. And so you see, for example, the odds now of a GOP Senate majority are around 95 and 100. It was a tough task to begin with. When you lose toss-ups, I mean, Indiana, that's the most important call of the night so far. It didn't go Democrats' way. It suggests problems for Democratic incumbents in other rural states, of which there are a lot elsewhere on the map.
Mary Bruce, you cover Capitol Hill for us every single day. Big night for Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader.
Absolutely. It's a huge night for him. And to Nate's point, so much of whether or not the Senate can flip will come down to those deep red states where Democrats are now in the fight of their life, like Indiana, where you have so many Democrats who are trying to walk this fine line. On one hand, they're trying to show they can work with the president, but they're also trying to show that they can stand up to him. And I've spent a lot of time in these states like Missouri, North Dakota, West Virginia. And what it comes down to for a lot of Republicans there, it's going to be hoping that they get a bounce off of Kavanaugh. So many Democrats hoping that if they hammer health care enough, it'll bring them a win.
I want to take a look at a couple of those big red states. The vote not ready to project in either of these Senate races yet, but we do have some votes coming in from the state of Tennessee right there. You see Marsha Blackburn, the Republican, with a wide lead over Phil Bredesen, moderate Democrat. Democrats had some hope that he might be able to do well there, but he is not. He is trailing Marsha Blackburn right now. Juju Chang in the Blackburn headquarters just outside of Nashville.
I'm not hearing you properly, George, but I will tell you that Marsha Blackburn is in the House watching the election returns. Her staff is incredibly confident and pumped up about what they're seeing in the early returns. But what I will tell you is that the Tennessee voters, and remember this is a very deep red state, is very much an open story. It's an uphill climb for Bredesen, and they offered a very stark contrast with popular former governor who was basically campaigning on a theme of civility, and yet it seems as though the enthusiasm in the exit polls are going towards Marsha Blackburn, who is a firebrand, who boasts about being a knuckle-dragging, unapologetically, anti-politically correct congresswoman, and she seems to be maintaining the support of women, especially suburban women, which is a key swing group that both sides have been looking at. Today she's been holding it by a margin of 59 to 41, and it looks like very much an uphill climb for Phil Bredesen tonight, George.
Not ready to call it yet, but Marsha Blackburn has a big lead. Let's take a look at the state of West Virginia right now, where the incumbent Democrat Joe Manchin is up against the Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. A lead there for Joe Manchin. Democrat in the most Trump state in the country, Matthew Dowd. He did his best also to hug President Trump when he could, but he really emphasized the issue of health care.
Yeah, he absolutely emphasized the issue of health care. And keep in mind, he was one of the only Democratic senators to vote for Kavanaugh in the hearing and go back to that. And so I think this may be an exception to the rule where the Democrat is able to overcome geography, which is a problem in West Virginia. It's a deep red state, deeply favors Donald Trump. We'll see if Manchin can pull it out. This may be the few areas he can overcome it.
This is a close one. Joe Manchin, though, a known quantity in the state of West Virginia.
Absolutely. They know Joe. He says, I'm still the guy that you know, that I'm just a little older. But you saw, George, in that ad where he took aim at the lawsuit filed by 20 AGs in this country,
including
to block
Patrick Morrisey,
including Morrisey himself.
That would invalidate Obamacare and the pre-existing conditions. We'll be right back.
Gopi's found a way to keep her receipts tidy, even when nothing else is.
Snap and sort your expenses with QuickBooks and find on average $4,628 in tax savings. QuickBooks, backing you.
You might take something for your heart.
that the 2020 re-election campaign is run in the state of Florida. So that's something that I know that the White House is definitely paying close attention to. Something else in Florida, the 27th district, which was Ileana Ros-Lehtman's district, she retired. It was an open seat. Donna Shalala, who used to be the Health and Human Services Secretary under Clinton, she won that seat. It's the first time in 30 years that a Democrat will hold that seat in Florida. So that's a pickup for Democrats.
Tara and Mike, thank you very much. We'll be coming back to you throughout the evening. I want to go now to another race that we're watching really closely. That's in Missouri, where the Democratic incumbent Claire McCaskill is fighting a tough Republican challenger to keep her seat. And ABC's Deborah Roberts is right there. Deborah, what are you seeing and hearing?
Hey, Dan. Yeah, fighting for her political life. Claire McCaskill's supporters are starting to trickle in. They sort of seem to be a mix of excited and also cautious, reflecting what she has already acknowledged, which is this is going to be a nail-biter. Now, Claire McCaskill is a Democrat in a state that is pretty largely Republican, and she admits that this has been a very tough race. She won by double digits last time. This time, she knows that it is all up in the air. Her Republican challenger, Josh Hawley, has had a lot of support from President Trump.
Brad Paisley and Carrie Underwood host the CMA Awards live November 14th on ABC.
It's your turn to seize the day.
Wednesday, fall in love with the show that celebrates life's defining moments.
Seat extended their majority. Democrats have picked up 2 seats in the House. They need 23 to take control. We do have a new result coming in from the House, and this is a disappointment to Democrats. It comes from the state of Kentucky. Amy McGrath, the former Marine combat pilot, defeated by the 4-term incumbent Andy Barr. As you said, Martha Raddatz, she ran a different kind of campaign. It wasn't good enough.
It certainly wasn't good enough, but this is a district that Trump won by 15 points. Her opponent, Andy Barr, looks like will get that 4th term. He was all in on Trump. McGrath did not air any negative ads. She was very straightforward. It was a new kind of model. They put in a candidate who was a combat pilot, who was a Marine, but it just didn't take her far
And John
enough.
Carl, the Democrats said they didn't need Amy McGrath to win. We shouldn't read too much into it. But so far, it just has to be said, the Democrats are having, so far, a lot of vote to come in, a disappointing night.
They are not winning where they thought they were going to win. We had 7 potential pickups in the state of Florida. Republicans have held on to 5 of those seats already. Democrats have only picked up 1. We're still waiting for vote count on there. In Virginia, they've only picked up one of the seats they were tracking. So Democrats are not winning in the way they were hoping to win early in the night. But like you said, there's a lot of vote to count.
A lot of vote to come in, a lot of suburban vote to come in, Mary Bruce.
And Democrats, I'm sure, are not pleased with what they're seeing down in Florida, John. But Democrats would also argue that they only need one seat in Florida. And one important outstanding seat is the one held by Congressman Curbelo down in Florida, which, of course, is a district where Clinton outperformed Trump.
We do have another result coming in. It's coming in from the Senate. Marsha Blackburn, we were just talking about that. Marsha Blackburn will win the Senate seat in the state of Tennessee. Marsha Blackburn, that is a hold for the Republicans right there. She's a strong Trump supporter. Phil Bredesen, former governor, popular in the state, but this is a red state right now. Let's go back to Juju Chang, just outside of Nashville and Blackburn's headquarters.
Well, what we're projecting, George, is that Tennessee is doubling down on Trumpism tonight. You know it's a deep red state, and they will be sending their first female senator from Tennessee. And she's not just any woman. She's a firebrand who calls herself a hardcore, card-carrying conservative and brags about packing a pistol in her purse. She has Velcroed herself to President Trump's agenda. In fact, he came here to this state 3 times to rally for her. In fact, I was there in Chattanooga on Sunday, and one of the biggest applause lines, George, was when they would say, "Don't give another vote to Chuck Schumer or the D.C. Democrats," and that resonated. She was fighting against, as you mentioned, the moderate governor, the very popular here, who basically campaigned against tribalism, against the divisiveness, and he was endorsed by Taylor Swift, as you know, and the Bredesen camp was very much hoping for the Swift lift.
And welcome back to the Countdown here on ABC 7 NY. I'm Bill Ritter with Eyewitness News, WABC TV, Channel 7. Been quite an exciting night, and we do have some projections to make. ABC News projecting now that the polls in New York have closed at 9 o'clock. Here are the projections from ABC News. Governor Andrew Cuomo doing what his father did so many years ago and winning a 3rd term, projected to win a 3rd term as governor of New York. Right now with 1%, just 1% of the precincts reporting Mr. Cuomo has 76% to Mark Molinaro's 21%. Mr. Molinaro, the chief executive of the county executive of Dutchess County in upstate New York. And they're also projecting, ABC News is, that Kirsten Gillibrand, the incumbent senator from New York, the junior senator, easily defeating, they believe, Shell Farley, a hedge fund, financial services executive. This was her first race. This is very preliminary. 1% of the precincts reporting 79 to 21 will not be the final tally on this, but Senator Gillibrand projected now to beat her opponent, Ms. Farley, in the Democratic race, in the Senate race for the junior senator of New York. Josh Einiger is at Andrew Cuomo headquarters at the Sheraton in Midtown Manhattan, where the crowd now understands that he has been projected to be the winner. Josh?
And Bill, as you were talking, the results came up on the screen behind me, and the crowd, of course, predictably went wild. This was, of course, not unexpected that Governor Cuomo would cruise to re-election, just like his father did now for a 3rd consecutive term against the Dutchess County executive Mark Molinaro. Also, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand winning re-election, as you just said. There are other races, though. This is not just the Cuomo headquarters. This is the headquarters for the state Democratic Party. And so there are all sorts of races that people here are waiting to hear about. The other real top of the ticket races, statewide races, I should say, Tish James, the public advocate, city public advocate who's running for attorney general. Those numbers are not in yet. There is no call on that. Same with Tom DiNapoli, who's running for re-election as state comptroller. But the state Democrats, of course, are trying very hard to flip certain House seats as well, as Democrats across the country try to retake the House in particular. One House seat that they're watching in particular is the New York 19th, which is up in the Hudson Valley and the Catskills. This is John Faso, who's the incumbent, who is being challenged by Antonio Delgado, who is a Rhodes Scholar, African-American former rapper who has posed a serious challenge to Congressman Faso in an area of farming and agricultural area that does skew Republican. That is seen as a bellwether for races, of course, across the country. Another race that we are watching is in Staten Island, which, of course, is the only real Republican stronghold in the city of New York. Dan Donovan is the Republican incumbent, and he is fighting off a challenge by Max Rose, a Democratic healthcare executive. So they are all watching and waiting for word on all of those races, which are kind of the real, would be the real intrigue in a night like tonight. This was not necessarily an unexpected result, but one that people here are very happy to hear nonetheless. Bill?
Okay, Josh Einiger, keep us posted. We're going to get back to you in a few minutes, Josh. And if the governor starts talking, I hope you'll let us know. Joining us now, our old friend Hank Scheinkoff, a political consultant and analyst, back with us. And we have a new guest, Matt Hale, who's a professor of political science at Seton Hall University. Professor, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I don't want your mic to slip off, so just clip it up and move it slightly. There you go, it's about to slip off. Okay, let's push it. Tell me what you thought about this. No surprise with Governor Cuomo, no surprise with Senator Gillibrand. Josh talked about some of the other races, too.
So I absolutely no surprise for the governor. You know, he was expected to win, and it looks like he's going to do that. I think the interesting thing is now you've got the senator and the governor who might be angling for higher office.
They each say in their debates they're not going to run for president in 2020.
Right. 2020 is a long way away for that promise to stick. So they might be up there.
Hank?
The dish ran away with the spoon.
And that's your answer, right? You're going to stick with that? So that means nothing now, that the election.
What it means is, look, it's ridiculous for either of them to say they're not going to do something when they really want to do it, both of them. The question is, when do they find out what they're going to do, and when they find the moment. When 20,000 people are screaming your name out the street, you know, something tends to happen.
You know, in 2006, when Hillary Clinton ran for a second term as senator, I asked her that question in this studio, in the debate, and she said, you know, I don't know what's going to happen. Right now I'm focusing on the Senate. She tried to not say, no, I'm not going to run, and it kind of sounded ridiculous. These candidates say, I'm not going to run, and you're saying, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because, as Hank said, when you have 20,000 people screaming, when you have donors lining up to say, I want to support your campaign, when you've got, you know, the country calling, then you can sort of say, New York needs me, but guess what? The nation needs me more.
You're in Seton Hall. You saw what happened to the New Jersey State Senator, U.S. Senator Bob Menendez. Projected to win right away. There was not much of a doubt there, even though the numbers are not really in yet. What's happening? What's your projection for what's going to happen with the Democrats try to take about the House?
Well, in New Jersey in particular, I think there's a number of places that Democrats are going to do certainly very well. In the 11th District and the 2nd District, and both of those are pretty solid for Democrats. Mikey Sherrill in the 11th and Jeff Wren Drew in the 2nd. So I think those are going to be pretty solid Democratic pickups.
So interesting that in your state of New Jersey, the Republicans worked very hard to gerrymander to protect the Republican seats, and so many of those seats are now in jeopardy for the Republicans.
Yeah, it really is a moving election. Both of the districts, the 7th, the 11th, and a little bit to the 2nd, have moved more Democratic, but particularly the 11th and the 7th have become a little bit more Democratic just in the way that it's been carved up. And that's going to help the Democrats up there.
Interesting. It was done to protect the Republicans, I think.
Listen, sometimes having the pencil doesn't work if you're in the wrong year. And they're in the wrong year. And the state's changing. There's an out movement from the cities in New Jersey to the suburbs. There are new immigrants coming in. It's changing. There's something new going on. When that happens, you can't protect those seats.
Florida not turning out the way, you want to talk about Florida a little bit? Florida not turning out necessarily the way some people thought it would be. It looks like the Republicans are having a pretty good night there tonight, although there's no projections. I'm going to look for ABC News projections. No, not yet for Florida, not involved. West Virginia, Manchin is going to win. Senator Manchin, Joe Manchin, is going to win based on the vote. So he thought, well, he came out and supported Kavanaugh, so that made a big difference, I think.
Yeah, I think that was a big, important vote for Joe Manchin. You know, one of the things that we have to know about Florida is it's never over till it's over. You know, there's a lot of things that can happen the rest of the night in Florida, and I think it's a little early to say exactly what's going to happen down there.
Any ideas, any opinions about, you heard Josh talk about Antonio Delgado versus John Faso. Any thoughts about that race up in upstate in the Kingston area?
You know, I think what's interesting is that on paper, you wouldn't say the Democrat has much of a shot up there, right? He certainly doesn't seem like he's the type of candidate that district would vote for. but apparently he's doing better than expected, and that could be just because of the anti-Trump feeling we're seeing all over the place.
Anti-Trump, and a lot of people from New York City have second homes up in Dutchess County, and we are told that the Democratic Party made a very big push to get couples who have second homes up there, one of them to register to vote up there.
And to break the law, why not?
That doesn't break the law.
Oh,
if they own property
where do you
there.
live? Where do you live? Where do you vote? Where do you live? Where do you pay your taxes? I mean,
They're paying taxes in both places.
Yes,
right. So you split the couple. Then they should.
It has been taken to court, this ruling, and they have ruled if you have property there, you have a right to vote on them.
That's kind of odd, if you ask me. You know, what do you split the couples? The mother lives here, the father lives here.
They don't live.
No,
they vote there. They just vote there. If you own property and you pay property taxes, you can't vote two places.
Where do you file your taxes?
You file your taxes in the state of New York.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
Look, what do I think about the race? John Faso works hard. Delgado, newcomer to that particular part, to that larger district. Could anything happen? It's a year where anything happens. Republicans are.
But a fresh face for the Democrats, and he's going to be heard from, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're seeing a lot of that. There's a lot of fresh faces for Democrats coming up.
On the ground in that area is our Eyewitness News reporter Joe Torres. He is at Delgado headquarters at the Senate Garage, which is sort of a big event place in the town of Kingston. Joe?
And it used to be a garage, Bill, and they've given it a pretty nice makeover. But yes, this is election night headquarters for Antonio Delgado here in Kingston tonight, really on the northern edge of our viewing area. And before we show you a picture of both of these candidates, let me just tell you a little bit about the 19th congressional district here in New York. It encompasses 11 counties. It's rather large, goes from the Hudson Valley all the way up into the Catskills. And for viewers who watch Channel 7, 3 of those counties are in our area, all of Ulster, all of Sullivan, and a portion of Dutchess County. All right, the two candidates. Let's talk first about the challenger. Antonio Delgado, the Democrat, 41 years old. He's married, father of 2 boys. He lives not far away in Rhinebeck. Educationally, listen to this, he went to Colgate and then from there earned a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford and continued his education with a law school degree from Harvard. But one of the obstacles that he's had to overcome in this race is that he moved only recently, last year, from New Jersey to Rhinebeck, and it was soon thereafter that he declared his candidacy in this race. Another hurdle that he's had to overcome, and we'll see if he does by the end of tonight, the GOP has had an absolute field day, the party, by looking at Delgado's past. He is a former big city rapper, and they pulled some of the videos of him rapping to songs that included profane and sexist lyrics. Delgado, for his part, has attacked his opponent, you talked about him, John Faso, largely in the issue in the area of health care, how Faso supported the Republican health care plan that ultimately failed in the Senate. Let me tell you a little bit about the incumbent, John Faso, 66 years old. He's the incumbent, but he hasn't been in Washington long. Voters upstate put him in Washington only 2 years ago. In 2016, he's married, also 2 children. His kids are grown up and through college. He lives in Kinderbrook. He went to a SUNY school, Western New York, Brockport, just outside of Rochester, and then he got his law degree at Georgetown University. Of the 2 candidates, he has the better name recognition, and it's not just because he's the incumbent. For you politicos in New York, you might remember the name, John Faso. He ran for governor in 2006, an unsuccessful bid. He lost to Eliot Spitzer, and he served in the state assembly for a long time, 1987 to 2002. Those long-term roots, Bill and Hank, he has highlighted throughout the campaign and called his opponent for parachuting in for this election. We can tell you so many people are keeping an eye on this race because throughout it all, there has been no runaway frontrunner. And that has emboldened the Democrats, yes, as they try and flip control of the House from Republican to Democrat control. Both candidates, because of this tight race, have pumped millions of dollars. We're talking millions of dollars here in a district that's filled with rural voters who have rural concerns. And we can tell you this, the district has a slight edge registered Democrats over registered Republicans. But Bill and Hank, if you look at the history of this district, you go back a little bit, they gave the edge to President Trump last time around, and before that, they gave the edge to President Barack Obama. You want to talk a little bit more about that residency thing?
Yes,
that you guys
I would
talking
like to
about?
ask you, Joe.
We learned that Yeah, let me get into that a little bit, Bill. Democrats, yes, in terms of strategy, you know that many New Yorkers have second homes here upstate, and many of those homes fall within the 19th district. So from a strategy point of view, they've approached some of those people and said, listen, it would really help if you registered and voted upstate as opposed to New York City, where the value of your vote in a very tight race could make a big difference, as opposed to the 5 boroughs where Democrats outnumber Republicans 6-1. You can imagine, Bill, the reaction from Republicans when something like this. Really? That, they say, is what infuriates the locals. Yes, that you've got people who are part-time residents, secondary residents, if you will, trying to determine the political leadership for the people who live here year-round. That's the story in a nutshell. We'll keep you posted as things progress here in Kingston.
Joe,
we'll send it back to you.
Continuing, though, Joe, the idea that that you raised about Faso criticizing Delgado as him being sort of a carpetbagger, just, you know, parachuting in. Professor Hale, you know, we were talking about this whole residency. You know, if Delgado should eke out a victory here, and that plays a role, that's going to be controversial. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that the charge of being a carpetbagger, the charge of being not from here, is one we're seeing in a bunch of different places throughout the region. And, you know, it does have some legs. People want to vote for someone that they've seen at the corner store. And Mr. Delgado has not been there long. And certainly, on the other hand, residents who go there on the weekend are at the corner store. They pay taxes there. They support the schools there, just like anyone else does.
And local people hate them for being there. Let's be clear. If you have no money and someone comes from New York City and has a lot of money and suddenly appears and says, by the way, I'm really a resident of your neighborhood, they say, what, are you out of your mind? I mean, that doesn't help Delgado. It hurts him. And the more public that becomes, the less likely he is to win. We have no polling information about what it was like, and you saw up there the screen that we had for Joe. There's 0% reporting, so we really don't know. But obviously, if the Democrats feel they could win on something like this, Ditto East End of Long Island, same thing. Locals don't like the people who summer there or weekend houses. Why? Because the income gap is so extreme. Ditto in upstate New York in those counties. They did the same thing in Long Island, though, in the East End, in the Hamptons. Democrats asked people who had, you know, couples owning homes in both places, have one of the people in your household register out there. Lee Zeldin, you know, is a big Trump supporter. People in Suffolk County who have homes here, who don't have homes here, just live out in Suffolk County, they're big Trump supporters too. Mr. Trump won Suffolk County. If half the people from New York City had registered out there and not voted for Trump, things might have been different. I think it's a little different out in that district because Congressman Zeldin, I think, is probably a little bit more secure and popular. He's a veteran. He's got, you know, sort of a solid standing within the community. He's been there for a long time, and maybe more so than Faso. So I think that might be okay. I understand we got some early returns in the race in Staten Island between Rose and Donovan. Let's take a look at what we have with 31% of the precincts reporting, 52-47, a much closer race than Mr. Donovan thought he was going to be engaged in. 31% is now starting to get substantive with all of that, Hank and Professor Hale. 52-47, it's going to be a close race throughout the night. Well, look, the reason why it's close is probably because Rose is doing better in Brooklyn and it's more intense turnout. And the second part is the most important part. For people in Staten Island, he's conservative in one way. He served in Afghanistan. He's a combat veteran. He can talk about that. That's a real deal. And the healthcare thing. Okay. Professor Hale, really great meeting you. You want to stick around? Can you stick around for a little bit? Sure. For the next half hour? Great. Hank, will you stick around? If not, I know you're busy. Oh, no. If you want me to be here, I'll stay around. I would love to have you here. I'm not, you know, there's other places I could be, Bill. I know that. And you're choosing to stay with us, and it means a lot to me and my family. It does. And all of us here at Channel 7. Our live coverage continues here on ABC 7. We're going to be here all night. Right now, we're going to toss to an interview I did earlier today with Cokie Roberts. I've been at ABC News for 26 years, at ABC News, WABC. And when I first started here, our next guest worked with me. When we started Good Morning America Sunday, our newsreader at the time was one Mary Martha Corinne Morrison Claiborne Boggs Roberts. You may know her by her stage name. The great political reporter, Cokie Roberts. Great to see you.
Oh, Bill, always a treat to be with you.
And I loved it when we would toss to you for the news on Good Morning America Sunday.
It was fun, except it was really early.
It was very early, but you still get up early, and tonight you're going to be up late.
Be up all night.
How late will you be up?
All night. It'll be all night. there's no way. Election night, you just have to expect to not go to sleep.
Right, so that's the personal angle. What about the political angle? How tight will this be?
Well, the political angle could be very late as well, because depending on how it goes in the House of Representatives, if it's close, there are a bunch of California seats. And California not only comes in late, but it counts forever. They count and count and count. So it could go all night.
And California could become the state that tips
it could be
the House over to the Democrats.
It's entirely possible that, I mean, as we look at these races going in, it's entirely possible that the Democrats will have that wave. And by the time you get to California, it'll be a done deal. But it's equally possible that that will not be the case, because the Democrats are competing in very, very Republican seats. And it's not going to be easy for them to achieve this majority.
The huge number of people, we're told, who are voting today. There was
Right.
a professor yesterday that ABC News put out saying that he predicts maybe up to 105 million voters from this midterm, the largest midterm ever. There's no way to really parse that, what that means, right?
Not only is there no way to parse it, but in the early voting, what we were seeing in state by state was almost even splits between Democrats and Republicans voting early. So there seems to be energy on both sides.
So when President Trump 2 weeks ago said, well, you know, this bomb thing is sort of getting in the way of this because we were really, the early returns were in our favor, there's no way to know that.
No.
Yeah, because they don't count the votes until the polls close.
He was saying what he was saying.
And that's it. But either way, Donald Trump is responsible large part for this huge turnout.
Absolutely, absolutely, on both sides, and also responsible for a huge amount of money. You've never seen money like this.
$5 billion. $5 billion.
It's crazy. But for the first time, what we were hearing leading into the election was Republicans complaining about the Democrats' money and talking about the green wave in the Democratic Party. And that is a reaction against President Trump.
So just as a longtime political
yes, very long time
witness, well, not that long.
Yeah.
You still think young, and what I'm getting to is, what does this mean for our society? What does it mean for our political society that we spend $5 billion on a midterm election?
Well, it's great for TV stations, but it's an indictment, really, of the political process that the money is so important. But it is important.
It is important, and Donald Trump is bringing some of that money in. There's no question about that.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of money on both sides, but what we're seeing much more this time than we normally see, particularly in a midterm, is Democrats able to raise a good deal of money.
It's interesting. We have a Senate candidate, Bob Hugin, who's never run for anything, a former pharmaceutical executive, running against Bob Menendez in New Jersey as in the Senate race. He's paying millions of dollars of his own money for TV ads.
I know. When you have that, I always feel sorry for the family of a billionaire who spends all of his own money.
The children's inheritance.
Right, children's inheritance is going as they have them look at themselves lovingly on TV.
Okay, you have that, and so we're no stranger to that. Michael Bloomberg,
right.
John Corzine, and all these very wealthy people, and Donald Trump.
And often it doesn't work. It didn't work with John Corzine.
And the second time, yeah.
And it hasn't worked. There's Steve Forbes. I mean, we can.
They worked with Michael Bloomberg.
And
he's spending $100 million in this campaign as well.
And that is something that has Republican operatives very upset.
And yet, on the ballot this morning in New York City, there was a proposition that said, let's limit the contributions from $5,000 to $2,000 and increase the match, the public match, from 6-to-1 to 8-to-1, which goes against millionaires and billionaires self-funding.
I'll see whether it passes.
Yes, that's the question. It's already 6-to-1 with a $5,000 limit.
Right.
So that's a lot of socialized contributions.
That is. But you know, voters, when they're actually aware of it, tend not to like the idea of them having to finance political campaigns.
I want to get into the weeds a little bit about who's running and who's not, but I can't, as I was preparing to talk to you, I couldn't help but think what your parents, the two congresspeople from Louisiana, Hale Boggs and Lindy Boggs, what they would think of the incivility in politics these days as they see what's going on. What would your mom and dad say?
Well, my mom would be particularly upset because she was a proper lady. But the truth is, come on, they grew up in the rough and tumble of Louisiana politics, and it's not exactly as if they didn't see some really awful things happen, particularly in their youth.
Right, but there was no Twitter then either.
There was no Twitter, which was a good thing. But they got involved in politics in college to run against the Huey Long successors. So it was not civil at all. It was dangerous.
Right, the public didn't see that, though. It was the sausage making in politics that we didn't see. Now we see it.
Well, the public saw a lot of it at that point because it was out in the open. I mean, it was scary times.
War times, yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. There's much more out there of people attacking each other just to attack, and not just the politicians. The voters are on the attack as well.
It's dangerous. Do you post much on social media?
No, I don't post anything.
Because they would go after you no matter what you said.
But they don't go after you even if you don't post anything. They go after you. You know, I get things basically saying, just die. And my reaction is, no, I'm not going to die. No, really.
Well, you can slough that off. But we were talking before we went on, and you had a great suggestion. We were talking about the lack of civility in our public discourse and what it's affecting, how it's affecting children. And I know that's something you think about, and we all think about it as parents. You had a great suggestion.
Well, I think that not only is all of social media rude, but just the fact that you say, Alexa, tell me what time it is. You know, I feel we should say, please, Alexa, tell me what time it is, and then thank you, Alexa. Just the basics of civility. One of the things that just partly amused me and partly horrified me in this campaign season was millennials saying they couldn't vote absentee because they had never put a stamp on anything. Didn't their mothers teach them to write thank you notes?
Apparently not.
I mean, people do need to be a whole lot more polite, if nothing else.
Let me say that my millennials do write thank you notes, and they know how to put a stamp on. Even when they went to camp, I would give them stamped envelopes with my address on it, so that they would write letters. Exactly. But I think that's the simple stuff. We have veered away from it.
But simple stuff, what manners are, is a form of respect. And when you are mannerly, you are respecting someone else.
I want to go into some of the kinds of people who are running, and the numbers are just unbelievable.
Right.
411 women, ethnic minorities, and LGBTQ people are running for governor, Senate, and the House. 272 women out of 964 candidates. There are only, I think, 83 women in Congress right now. 272 women could be governor, senator, or congresswoman.
Yeah, they won't all be, of course, and many of them are running in very difficult districts. So even, for instance, in the House of Representatives, if every woman who is running in a race where she's leaning, the race is leaning in her direction or likely to go in her direction, and if every woman won those races and they won all the toss-up races, it would still only be 24% of the House of Representatives. So there's a long way to go.
Right, it's not total equality, but it's certainly better than it would be.
Much better. When my mother went to Congress in a special election in 1973, she was number 16 in the House of Representatives. So now it is considerably better than that, thank goodness. And these are very interesting women, Bill. Many of them are veterans. Many of them have national security experience. There's a former CIA operative running in Virginia. But they also are completely confident about their womanhood and their motherhood. And so their children are in their ads. Some of them have ads breastfeeding, all kinds of things that just sort of say, I'm a mom, and I know how to be a mom and go to work.
We have one candidate here in Long Island running against Peter King, Republican, the longest running Republican in New York. And she ran asking the FEC to fund her.
She won that.
Yes, she said.
She asked them to fund for child
care out of the campaign funds.
And that made all the sense in the world to me. I mean, you're running for office. You need somebody to take care of the children. Why shouldn't your campaign?
And P. King didn't oppose her on that.
No, that was wise.
Very smart of him to do that. I do want to talk about something that we saw last night on air. And that is at President Trump's rally, we saw Rush Limbaugh and two anchors at Fox News come on. And say how good a job President Trump has done. If you did that, if I did that,
would be fired
in about 4 seconds.
And appropriately so.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you know, Fox News has played it in a whole variety of ways, and they, on one hand, say that they're fair and balanced, and on the other hand, it's been pretty much the Trump News Network since his election, or leading up to his election and post. And so apparently today, there's been some pushback on the part of the network, but
they say it's been addressed and it was not proper.
but they went. I mean, who paid their way?
Well, Hannity was going to do his show there, so I guess the network paid the way then. Right, it's a good point. When you hear "quote unquote" fake news, you know, you've been a journalist a long time.
It makes me very upset. We work so hard to get it right and to make sure that it's fair and to have every detail correct, and even more so than usual now because we are under attack, and it's a good thing for us to do that. But the idea that it's fake is such a really a denigration of a fundamental American institution. I don't expect to be liked in the media, but I expect it to be believed.
And when you make an error, it's the worst feeling in the world.
It's horrible. Oh my God, it's horrible.
Terrible, right?
You pout about it for weeks.
Yeah, it's true, no, and I'm not so sure people understand that.
Right.
And yet, the way the whole information superhighway is going, anyone can do anything on this, and it doesn't make them a reporter.
No.
You know.
Well, that's one of the things that's so important about having mainstream news organizations with people called editors and producers.
There's a process by
There's a process, and everything is checked and double checked and questioned.
Predictions? You don't make predictions, I know, but what is your gut feeling?
Well, my predictions often aren't right, although I did predict that Trump would be president, and everybody thought, oh, poor dear, she's past it. But you know, my predictions are pretty pedestrian today. I would say, yes, Democrats pick up some governor's races, which is very important. On Election Day 2016, I said if I were a Democratic operative, what I'd do is go straight for the governors, because they had lost a ton of them in the Clinton and Obama eras and state legislatures, and we're about to have a 2020 census, and so that's terribly important.
And we know that's already controversial.
Right.
You know, are you a citizen? Right. Then that's going to affect it.
So I think they will pick up some governor's seats.
And the House?
And I think that they're likely to lose some Senate seats. And the House, when I look at it seat by seat, I get them to 217, and they need 218. But that requires, you know, a lot of the toss-ups going Republican. Now, the reason I think a lot of the toss-ups will go Republican is because they are very Republican districts. So I would say that the Democrats probably do get the House, but get it by a tiny majority.
I can't tell you how thrilled I am to talk to you. Sit
Bill,
down.
It's so
really
nice
great
to be with an old friend like you who knows the business so well.
And my best to your husband, Steve.
Thank you.
All right, Cokie Roberts of ABC News. Good luck tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Cokie.
If you ask me to bet, and our model does make bets, it would say more likely than not they get there in the suburbs. They maybe get there a little bit out west. I mean, California is going to be a big part of the story. But the really big blue wave, where they win 45 seats, you have to go deep into Trump territory, and they haven't really won any of those races yet.
Yeah, Tom, go to your board, because we can see it right there. You see all those red check marks on the board of the states that have come in early.
You see them all here. Florida, they're still performing well. Republicans did very well in Florida, only losing so far 27. We're still holding out in 26. But, George, the other thing we have to talk about here, we're still waiting on 85 races. There are several races in California where Democrats think they're going to do well. There are races in Texas that Democrats feel they can pick up some seats. We still have Michigan. We still have seats in New Jersey. And, of course, we haven't even talked about Pennsylvania yet. Redistricting there is going to help Democrats.
Matthew Dowd, you talked about Florida in 2000. If we're waiting for California House seats, we could be waiting a month.
Yeah, because it's a huge chunk of those are ballots by mail. They have to count them over days and days and days and days. If we get to California and the Democrats are at 20 seats or net 19 seats, we could be here 10 days from now.
Okay, for right now, let's take a look at the big state of Florida. Tom, let's pull up the Florida Senate race, because we're going to keep an eye on that all night long right now. Still close there in the state of Florida, the biggest prize of the night.
George, this has gotten really, really interesting. So, Scott, so look, we have all these people voting. We're at 3.8 million, and what's it come down to right now is about 60,000 votes an hour ago. Scott's picked that up he's opened the margin only by 4,000 votes, but that's what we're talking about. It's so close, and it has come down to Broward and Miami-Dade County. I've been checking all over the state to see how some of the other bellwethers were doing, and Nelson's doing well, like places like St. Lucie, Pinellas County. He's winning all these bellwethers, so he should be doing okay. The problem is he's overperforming in Broward County. He's underperforming in Miami-Dade. Overall in South Florida, when we talk about Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade County, Rick Scott's doing better than President Trump did, and President Trump won this state. So it may have paid off, to go and campaign and tell people in Puerto Rico he cared about them, to break with the president on gun control after Parkland. Those things may have helped Scott, but this race is still so tight. And when we talk about Broward County, and I think it's going to come down to Broward or Miami-Dade, 83% reporting. We still have 17% left there and 9% in Miami-Dade.
Okay, what are you seeing in Florida, David?
Well, I think the most important thing to look at Florida is Donald Trump's approval rating. He won by 100,000 votes, as we know, so close, a little more than 1% 2 years ago. 51%, more than half of the voters who turned out in Florida say they approve of President Trump's job performance. But Rick Scott, as you know, was an early supporter of Donald Trump, and I was down there after the hurricane, and he took a break from campaigning, and he
Welcome back to the countdown, 9:38 in New York City and the tri-state area. Welcome again. I'm Bill Ritter with Channel 7 Eyewitness News, continuing our countdown, streaming it live on ABC7NY and our social media platforms, including my Facebook page. I want to introduce the people who are here right now, and then we're going to go out to some reporters to get some insight and a little update on what's happening. But I have two Hofstra students. Hank Scheinkoff is not one of them. He is long past his college days. But with me, closest to me, Miranda Pino is a junior majoring in history and public policy at Hofstra University. Her very good friend, and they work together in the security department of Hofstra University. Nick Zotto is a senior majoring in political science. You are a Republican. You are a Democrat. Yes. You get along famously. You work together, and you're fast friends off campus. I want to talk to you and about Hank, about what you're going through and what the youth vote may mean for tonight's election. But first, I want to get a little insight into one of the hot congressional races we are covering tonight. New Jersey, the 11th congressional district. Mikey Sherrill is running against Jay Weber, Republican. Mikey Sherrill, an up-and-coming Democrat, fighter pilot, helicopter pilot, in the military. With 28% of the vote in, she is up by 15%. Sandra Bookman is covering the Sherrill campaign at the Sheraton in Parsippany. We're going to get to her in just a moment, but I wanted to show you this race now with 30% of the vote in, 56 to 42. Sandra, I am told, is ready to talk to us. She's at Mikey Sherrill headquarters in Parsippany at the Sheraton. Sandra, can you hear me? I see you.
Yeah, I can hear you, Bill. Don't you just love live TV? You see me too, right?
I do, yes. Got everything.
Rather we're on digital, right? Okay. It has been just a really interesting night here at the headquarters. About 30 minutes ago, the place filled with people. It had been empty up until then. The minute everyone started walking to the room, of course, they got that big announcement about Sherrill's lead at this point. point in the race. Many of the people I had a chance to talk with earlier say that doesn't surprise them. I think you can hear them behind me now. Every time they see returns from a Democratic candidate, no matter where it is in the country, you get a shout like that. As I said, so far at the campaign headquarters tonight for Mikey Sherrill.
Along with Kathy Hochul, his running mate, Lieutenant Governor, he has done what his father did all those many years ago and won a third term as governor of New York. One of the men in between them, George Pataki, also did the same thing. The Cuomo family up there on the stage and the governor about to talk to the crowd. Let's listen in. We're having some problem with the governor, and I apologize for. We're hearing some audio. Apologize for interrupting Sandra Bookman, but we don't want to miss the governor.
What a night! Are we fired up? First of all, let's give a big round of applause to the greatest Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul. She has done a fantastic job. Also, congratulations to Senator Gillibrand.
So, Governor Cuomo, we're having some problems with his audio. Apparently, everyone is. It's bad audio coming from the Sheraton right there on the deck. We're going to kind of work on it. You see Jennifer Lee there. Sandra Lee, I should say, and she's there with her, along with her, looks like Matilda Cuomo to the governor's left, his mother, widow of former Governor Mario Cuomo, and several of his children. The governor winning a third term fairly handily. It took about 10 seconds for ABC News and AAP to call the governor for this win tonight, running against Mark Marinaro, the county executive of Dutchess County. All right, so we're going to try to get back to Sandra in a minute. I'm going to bring it back to the studio. We'll have, of course, tape of what the governor had to say on Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock when we have complete live coverage on our TV station. So we started to talk to you, young people, about what you're feeling about this election, how you feel about it. You know, your generation has gotten a lot of there's a lot of opinions about who you are, what you're doing. My experience with people your age is that I'm all for it. I mean, I put the future of this country in your hands. I think you guys are committed, dedicated. You have an awareness that a lot of people don't have. And I think you are committed to trying to get along in a way that some of the older people these days do not do. And there's a lot of incivility. Tell me about what it's like politically on your campus and how you guys get along and why you're a Democrat.
Well, on our campus, we have a lot of political activity. There's a very established Democratic club and a Republican club, and our Hofstra Chronicle allows us to sort of put forward editorials and to speak on these topics. We have a lot of events at our school and rallies that either bring us together or to speak about issues that are very important to us. Being a Democrat on campus means being able to connect with a lot of different other people, especially people that care about certain issues, working with other clubs, like the Feminist Club and the Safer Sex Club, in order to sort of bring the Democratic platform to Hofstra.
And how do you get along with Republicans?
I mean, I get along with Nick fine.
Nick, right. Nick, when they have their rallies and stuff, you Republicans, what's your reaction to that?
So actually, there was an example of this last semester. There was a protest to remove a statue of Thomas Jefferson that we have.
I remember.
We showed up and we had conflicting views talking about the legacy of the president, why the statue was there. And I thought overall, it was a very productive discussion. We got all of our views out, and in the end, it did affect something real on campus. It showed the symbolism of the statue that we have right in front of our student center.
Interesting. When you have that protest, what was your reaction?
Well, we had so many students come out and talk about their views and how they feel about the statue being on campus. Obviously, there are some issues that need to be addressed that are more that Thomas Jefferson may represent, but need to be addressed in a bigger way. A lot of people feel very uncomfortable being on campus because he was a slave owner and he had multiple children with a slave, and so people feel very uncomfortable around that. And so trying to work together, we have the protest pushed forward a group of professors that are working to figure out a way to address the statue.
You guys have, you're doing it differently though than perhaps other groups have done it, right? You get along with each other. It's not like you go to 0 to 60 in the hatred department.
Yeah. I'll definitely say, like, during the protest, there was a lot of people who were, very spirited about their positions. There was a few, bad words said back and forth. But as far as, like, when we come together to have an actual discussion, that's where you see, actual civility. We see that at the end of the day, we all just want to get our views across. There's no bad blood. I want to go to Governor Cuomo. He's speaking. Hank, let me hold your thought, whatever you have. Way to go to Cuomo, and you'll come back.
For women does not demean men. It respects us all. Fair wages do not diminish management, they increase productivity. Raising the minimum wage does not hurt business, it grows business. Smart gun safety laws does not stop sportsmen and legal gun owners, it saves lives of innocent victims. Building new airports and transportation doesn't cost taxpayers. It's an investment that creates jobs today and pays dividends tomorrow. My friends, new immigrants do not burden the economy, they invigorate it. Yes, we are the progressive state, and yes, we have the highest minimum wage and best paid family leave law, and yes, we are pro-union 100%. But we also have the highest number of jobs in our state's history, lower taxes, and have businesses with record profits. We can raise all boats together, and we are in New York. And today's election made clear that New York is not buying what President Trump is selling. We know his type too well. The president has defrauded this nation 2 years ago when he said he was for the middle class, and then he turned around the next day and gave a tax break to billionaires. And he raised taxes specifically targeted on New Yorkers. Well, fool me once, but in New York you don't fool us twice. The president said he would make America great again, but he doesn't understand what made America great in the first place. The president's strategy is divide and conquer. He uses fear and division to separate Americans. He preaches that diversity is the enemy, that our differences should be demonized. But how can we fear immigrants? We are all immigrants. Our people have all come from someplace else. George Washington was an immigrant. Thomas Jefferson was an immigrant. That's what made America, America. We don't fear diversity, we celebrate diversity. New York is 19 million people, all from all over the globe, forging one community. To attack diversity is to attack our essence. It is the very foundation of this state and this nation. And Mr. President, you were wrong about the Charlottesville rally. There are no good white supremacists. And Mr. President, There are no good KKK members, and there are no good anti-Semites, and there are no good homophobes, and there are no good misogynists, and there are no good Islamophobes. They are all un-American, Mr. President. And Mr. President, division only diminishes. We are better than that. We are not a nation of red states or blue states. We are a nation of red, white, and blue states. That's America. Political partisanship only paralyzes. In New York, we are not Democrats or Republicans. We are New Yorkers first, and we act that way. Mr. President, you forgot the first civics lesson you learned. When they asked you in elementary school to raise your right hand and repeat, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." Listen to the word.
I'm running for Senate, and it should not be the last. So I've traveled around our state, all 62 counties. I've done 17 town halls and lots of meetings with New Yorkers, and I've heard how people's lives are challenged and what difficulties they face. The picture is not what it should be, and it's not what New Yorkers deserve. We see families struggling to make ends meet, especially with trying to pay for health care, worrying about the rising cost of their drugs, the rising cost of their premiums. All the while, the drug companies, the insurance companies are making profits hand over fist. We also have seen the pain of anti-Semitism and racism and bigotry all across our state, all of which are on the rise under President Trump. We watch a president further divide this country along racial, ethnic, religious, cultural lines, sowing hate and fear, determined to build that wall and separate mothers from children at our border. There is a divisiveness and a hate that's tearing through our very fabric of our democracy.
the race for surrogate court judge is still way too close to call. If you can stay posted on.
And I am humbled for your vote because I am serving to honor that common bond that drives our advocacy, the fight for the empowerment of others, the fight for those who are most at risk, those most in need, those who need to be listened to, and those who are being marginalized. We recognize that we are all brothers and sisters in our struggle for equality and justice. And I know that we should show the world that we are united as ever in fighting for equality for every single American, regardless of their race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, cultural identity. Because injustice against one is an injustice against all of us. And the truth is, our work is not finished by a long shot. Because the promise of truth and justice is what binds us together. And we know deep inside our hearts and soul that now is not the time to remain silent. I've often said that we are called to be the light of the world. And that's exactly what this moment in time means. All of us has been fighting against what is wrong, what is evil, what is dark, because only light can drive out darkness. So we've done all the work, we've gotten our friends and loved ones to the poll, and I've never seen more energy than I've seen today. I want to thank every single person who worked hard in this election, every single one of you who knocked on doors, who made phone calls, who helped first-time candidates get elected, and everyone who stood in very long lines today in the rain to vote. And for all those who did vote, it is time for the antiquated voting laws that disenfranchise voters to be gone. It's time to bring our elections into the 21st century, right here in New York. It's time for early voting, automatic and online voter registration, and no excuse absentee voting. There's
Navarro, we are taking you inside our election coverage in our new room. It's basically our political war room here, right?
Yeah, because, I mean, this has been a night where we probably would know a lot of what was going on at this point. And, boy, this has been a night where we're still taking a look at everything, all the new numbers coming up. But we do have a couple of races that are decided at this point. By the way, I want to introduce you to our political science expert here, Matthew Hale with Seton Hall. And so good to have you kind of sitting here with us, correcting us if we get anything wrong. You are from New Jersey, and one of the big races there that has just been decided involves Mickey Sherrill, right?
Absolutely. Mickey Sherrill is a congressional candidate, Democrat from the 11th District. She's a Navy helicopter pilot, a former prosecutor, and a soccer and lacrosse mom. So she's a rock star candidate.
Went to the Naval Academy, and she has been declared the winner in that
In
race.
the 11th District. And another race that's getting a lot of buzz right now. In fact, when we saw that ABC had declared Max Rose in the District 11, the Staten Island District, winner, that was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think
reaction.
that's a shock. I mean, I think that everybody expected he would do well in Brooklyn, but it looks like he did well out in Staten Island. I think being a veteran probably helped him.
So you look at the corollary there. She went to the Naval Academy. He was served in Afghanistan. He was a Marine. Newbie. He's a newcomer to politics.
So, you know, the Democrats this year ran about 200 people with military experience. It's sort of a trend, and that seems to have done quite well for them in a lot of different places.
In that race, Mike Grimm was the person who had that position before, and then he was obviously had to deal with the legal troubles that involved. How much did that play in a role in terms of a Democrat now getting that seat?
Well, you know, I think it sets up a contrast, because I think when you have someone who's been in the military, there's sort of this presumption that that person is straightforward, honest, and of strong character. And so I think it's a contrast that probably played really, really well for Rose.
Yeah.
Now, you know, overall, since we've been keeping it through in its early stages, still early stages, but, you know, there was this talk of this blue wave, and not so, it does not appear right at this point. Democrats have picked up 8 key seats, from my accounting so far. They need a total of 23 to flip the House. But as you were saying, there's still a lot more of this night to go ahead. A lot of it locally, right?
Absolutely. There's still a lot more to go. And, you know, in New Jersey, there's the 7th, there's the 2nd, there's the 3rd. All of those are still in play. You know, so I think there's a lot more before this night is over.
Right. And we are expecting, by the way, to hear from Bob Huggins shortly. His concession speech should be coming up. So we'll be hearing from him. When we get to that, we'll take it, we'll share it with you all, of course. Unexpected things happening tonight. What do you think is the most unexpected thing that has happened at this point?
Well, I think
most surprising.
I think right now that all we're seeing, it seems as if the Democrats are still going to be able to take the House, but it's tough slogging. It's not going to be that they're going to take 40 seats or 50 seats or 60 seats, and it's going to be a huge blue tsunami. Whether it's a wave or a ripple, don't know. It does seem right now like at the end of the night, the Democrats are just going to squeak by with enough.
We heard Sarah Sanders earlier when she was speaking, describing this as not a blue wave, but literally just a ripple. So.
Right, it's definitely there's going to be seats switching to Democrats. It's just a question of how many.
Right, right. And
Okay,
we still don't know yet.
we just have this in. A big race in Texas, and ABC is declaring that Ted Cruz has won in that very hard-fought race.
That's that's an amazing story. That Beto O'Rourke raised $38 million. I mean, it's just in the last bit of the race. It's just an unbelievable amount of money.
It's the costliest race in the country, right?
Absolutely. And it was 110. I think it was over $100 million race.
And it's looking less likely as the night's going in that the Democrats can win the Senate side of it, because I just read also that the Democrats are up a seat now in that race. They got the Joe Donnelly seat, I think.
They did, and Joe Manchin also won too. And so the Democrats, I think it was a long shot for them to ever take the Senate. I think they had a pretty good hope of taking the House, but I think taking the Senate was always going to be a long shot for them.
Ted Cruz, though, he was sweating it out most of the night, because if you watch those numbers come in, it was a tough night.
Absolutely.
Very, very close race.
It's you can never underestimate someone with $30 million in the bank. So
money always
works.
You know, you brought up an interesting point when we were trying to crunch these numbers. In New Jersey, in particular, you're saying that the mail-in vote may have a real impact.
Actually, one of the things that's interesting is that there's been a change in the vote-by-mail law, and it used to be that you had to have your vote by mail in, and it would be counted on Election Day. The change in law is now that those votes are going to be counted till Thursday. So in a couple of races, till Thursday, so we can be here till Thursday. So in a district like the 7th, which is Tom Malinowski versus Leonard Lance, it's going to be razor sharp. So we could be here till Thursday trying to figure that out.
Wow. Well, we've seen it happen before, though. It has happened before in the past with some really, really tight races. Money spent on these midterm elections, it has been pretty astronomical in some of these races, particularly a lot of the races in New Jersey where candidates had spent far more, but the Democrats and the Republicans on both sides, right?
Absolutely. New Jersey is always an expensive place to run because you have to buy television time in New York and Philadelphia, because New Jersey doesn't have its own media market. So it's always been an expensive place to run. But I think nationally, Democrats were so excited about the possibility of taking seats in New Jersey, they were flooding money on
right, because you had a couple of Republicans saying, "Whoa, we're out of it. We're not going to run this time around."
Right.
And so those seats were open and available. And then you had a bunch of contested seats that, they thought, the Democrats thought that they could make some inroads in, obviously.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that's interesting about all of the candidates in New Jersey, for all the Democrats, they're all centrists. They're all in the middle. They're not on the far left wing of the party.
Right.
And I think that contributed a lot to their ability to raise money.
Well, you remember New Jersey used to always be that state that had more independents almost than regular party people. It still does. So, you look
You know what, guys? I'm going to interrupt you. We got Bob Huggins right now addressing his supporters. Why don't we listen in?
Hey, no, thank you so much. Listen, let's be clear. I'm proud of the campaign that we've all run. Thank you.